from A Clockwork Orange. What's it going to be then, eh? I take it up now, and this is the real weepy and like tragic part of the story, beginning, my brothers and only friends, in State Jail number 84F. You will have little desire to sluice you all the cally and horrible razzcas of the shock that sent my dad beating his bruised and crobby rookas against unfair like bog in his heaven, and my mum squaring her rot for ow, ow, ow in her mother's grief at her only child and son of her bosom, like letting everybody down real horror show. Then there was the starry, very grim magistrate in the lower court, gover-eating some very hard slovos against your friend and humble narrator, after all the cally and grahzny slander spat forth by P.R. Deltoid and the Rosses, bog blast them. Then there was being reprimanded and remanded in filthy custody among bonny perverts and prestoopniks. Then there was the trial in the higher court with judges and a jury, and some very nasty slovos indeed gover-eated in a very like solemn way, and then guilty, and my mum boo-ooing when they said 14 years, oh my brothers. So here I was now, 2 years just to the day of being kicked and clanged into Starjar 84F, dressed in the height of prison fashion, which was a one-piece suit of a very filthy-like cowl colour, and the number sewn on the groody part just above the old tick-tocker, and on the back as well, so that going and coming I was 6655321, and not your little droog Alex, not no longer. What's it going to be then, eh? It had not been like edifying, indeed it had not, being in this grahzny hellhole and like human zoo for 2 years, being kicked and toll-shocked by brutal bully warders and meeting vonny leering like criminals, some of them real perverts, and ready to dribble all over a luscious young malchick like your storyteller. And there was having to rabbit in the workshop at making matchboxes and itty round and round and round the yard for like exercise. And in the evening sometimes some starry prof-type vec would give a talk on beetles or the Milky Way or the glorious wonders of the snowflake. And I had a good smeck at this last one because it reminded me of that time of the toll-shocking and sheer vandalism with that dead coming from the public biblio on a winter's night when my droogs were still not traitors and I was like happy and free. Of these droogs I had sluiced but one thing, and that was one day when my P&M came to visit and I was told that Georgie was dead. Yes, dead, my brothers. Dead as a bit of dog cal on the road. Georgie had led the other two into a like very rich Chaloviek's house, and there they had kicked and toll-shocked the owner on the floor. And then Georgie had started to raz-raz the cushions and the curtains. Then old Dim had cracked at some very precious like ornaments, like statues and so on. And this rich beat-up Chaloviek had raged like real Bazumny and gone for them all with a very heavy iron bar. His being all raz-raz had given him some gigantic strength. And Dim and Pete had got out through the window, but Georgie had tripped on the carpet and then brought this terrific swinging iron bar crack and splooge on the Gulliver, and that was the end of traitorous Georgie. The starry murderer had got off with self-defence, as was really right and proper. Georgie being killed, though it was more than 1 year after me being caught by the Millicents, it all seemed right and proper and like fate. What's it going to be then, eh? I was in the Wing Chapel, it being Sunday morning, and the prison Charlie was gover-eating the word of the Lord. It was my rabbit to play the starry stereo, putting on solemn music before and after, and in the middle too, when hymns were sung. I was at the back of the Wing Chapel. There were 4 along here in Starjar 84F, near where the warders or chathos were standing with their rifles and their dirty, bolshy, blue, brutal jowls, and I could video all the plennies sitting down, sluicing the slovo of the Lord in their horrible, cowl-coloured prison platties, and a sort of filthy von rose from them, not like real unwashed, not grassy, but like a special real stinking von which you only got with the criminal types, my brothers, a like dusty, greasy, hopeless sort of a von. And I was thinking that perhaps I had this von too, having become a real plenny myself, though still very young. So it was very important to me, oh my brothers, to get out of this stinking grahzny zoo as soon as I could. And as you will viddy if you keep reading on, it was not long before I did. What's it going to be then, eh? Said the prison Charlie for the third raz. Is it going to be in and out of institutions like this, though more in than out for most of you? Or are you going to attend to the divine word and realize the punishments that await the unrepentant sinner in the next world as well as in this? A lot of blasted idiots you are, most of you, selling your birthright for a saucer of cold porridge, the thrill of theft, of violence, the urge to live easy. Is it worth it when we have undeniable proof, yes, incontrovertible evidence that hell exists? I know, my friends, I have been informed in visions that there is a place, darker than any prison, hotter than any flame of human fire, where souls of unrepentant criminal sinners like yourselves, and don't leer at me, damn you, don't laugh, like yourselves, I say, scream in endless and intolerable agony, their noses choked with the smell of filth, their mouths crammed with burning ordure, their skin peeling and rotting, a fireball spinning in their screaming guts. Yes, 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 I know. At this point, brothers, a plenty somewhere or other near the back row let out a shoom of lip music. And then the brutal chassels were on the job right away, rushing real scotty to what they thought was the seat of the shoom, then hitting out nasty and delivering tolchocks left and right. Then they picked out one poor trembling plenny, very thin and malenky and starry too, and dragged him off. But all the time he kept creeching, "It wasn't me, it was him, see?" Well, that made no difference. It was tolchocked real nasty, and then dragged out of the wing chapel, creeching his Gulliver off. "No," said the prison Charlie, "listen to the word of the Lord." Then he picked up the big book and flipped over the pages, keeping on wetting his fingers to do this by licking them, splurge, splurge. He was a bulgy, great burly bastard with a very red litso, but he was very fond of myself, me being young and also now very interested in the big book. It had been arranged as part of my, further education to read in the book and even have music on the chapel stereo while I was reading, oh my brothers. And that was real horror show. They would lock me in and let me slooshy holy music by J.S. Bach and G.F. Handel, and I would read of these starry Yehudis tolchocking each other and then peating their Hebrew vino and getting onto the bed with their wives like handmaidens, real horror show. That kept me going, brothers. I didn't so much cop out the later part of the book, which is more like all preachy gobber-eating and fighting and the old in-out, in-out. But one day the child said to me, squeezing me like tight with his bolshy beefy ruka, 6655321, think on the divine suffering, meditate on that, my boy. And all the time he had this rich Manny Von of Scotch on him. And then he went off to his little cantora to peat some more. So I read all about the scourging and the crowning with thorns and the cross vesh and all that cal, and I vidded better that there was something in it. While the stereo played bits of lovely Bach, I closed my glasses and busied myself helping in and even taking charge of the tolchocking and the nailing in, being dressed in a toga that was in the height of Roman fashion. So being in Starja 84F was not all that wasted, and the governor himself was very pleased to hear that I had taken to religion, and that was where I had my hopes. This Sunday morning, the Charlie read out from the book about Chelovieks who slushed the Slovo and didn't take a blind bit, being like a domy built upon sand, and then the rain came splash and the old boomer boom cracked the sky, and that was the end of that domy. But I thought that only a very dim vec would build his domy upon sand, and a right lot of real sneering droogs and nasty neighbours a vec like that would have, them not telling him how dim he was doing that sort of building. Then the Charles creached, "Right, you lot, we'll end with hymn number 435 in the prisoner's hymnal." Then there was a crash and plop and a whish, 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 while the plennies picked up and dropped and lick-turned the pages of their grahzny and malenky hymn books, and the bully fierce warders creached, "Stop talking there, bastards! I'm watching you, 920537. Of course, I had the disc ready on the stereo, and then I let the simple music for organ only come belting out with a growl, wow, 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 wow. Then the plennies started to sing real horrible. "Weak tea are we new brewed, but stirring make all strong. We eat no angel's food, our times of trial are long." They sort of howled and wept, these stupid Slovos, with the Charlie whipping them on with, "Louder, damn you, sing up!" And the warders creeching, "Just you wait, 7749222, and one on the turnip coming up for you, filth." Then it was all over, and the Charlie said, "May the Holy Trinity keep you always and make you good. Amen." And the shamble out began to a nice choice bit of Symphony No. 2 by Adrian Schweigselber, chosen by your humble narrator, oh my brothers. What a lot they were, I thought, as I stood there by the starry chapel stereo, viddying them all shuffle out, going meh and bah like animals, and up your piping with their grahzny fingers at me, because it looked like I was very special favoured. When the last one had slouched out, his rukas hanging like an 8, one warder left giving him a fair loud tolchock on the back of the Gulliver, and when I had turned off the stereo, the Charlie came up to me, puffing away at a cancer, sitting in his starry Bogman's platies, all lacy and white like a debauchka's, and said, "Thank you, as always, little 6655321, and what news have you got for me today?" The idea was, I knew, that this Charlie was after becoming a very great holy Cheloviek in the world of prison religion, and he wanted a real horror show testimonial from the governor, so he would go and gover-eat quietly to the governor now and then about what dark plots were brewing among the plennies, and he would get a lot of this cal from me. A lot of it would be all made up, but some of it would be true, Like, for instance, the time it had come through to our cell on the water pipes, knock, knock, knocky, knock, 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 that Big Harry man was going to break. He was going to toll-chock the water at slop time and get out in the water's platties. Then there was going to be a big throwing about of the horrible pistia we got in the dining hall, and I knew about that and told. Then the Charlie passed it on and was complimented, like by the governor, for his public spirit and keen ear. So this time I said, and this was not true, "Well, sir, it has come through on the pipes that a consignment of cocaine has arrived by irregular means, and that a cell somewhere along Tier 5 is to be the centre of distribution." I made all that up as I went along, like I made up so many of these stories, but the prison Charlie was very grateful, saying, "Good, good, good, I shall pass that on to himself," this being what he called the governor. Then I said, "Sir, I have done my best, have I not?" I always use my very polite gentleman's golos, gover-eating with those at the top. "I've tried, sir, haven't I?" "I think," said the Charlie, "that on the whole you have, 6655321. You've been very helpful, and I consider shown a genuine desire to reform. You will, if you continue in this manner, earn your remission with no trouble at all." "But, sir," I said, "how about this new thing they're talking about? How about this new, treatment that gets you out of prison in no time at all and makes sure that you never get back in again?" "Oh," he said, very wary, "where did you hear this? Who's been telling you these things?" "These things get around, sir," I said. "Two warders talk, as it might be, and somebody can't help hearing what they say. And then somebody picks up a scrap of newspaper in the workshops, and the newspaper says all about it. How about you putting me in for this thing, sir, if I may make so bold as to make the suggestion?" You could video him thinking about that while he puffed away at his cancer, wondering how much to say to me about what he knew about this vestige I'd mentioned. Then he said, "I take it you're referring to Lodovico's technique." He was still very wary. "I don't know what it's called, sir," I said. "All I know is that it gets you out quickly and makes sure that you don't get in again." "That is so," he said, his eyebrows like all beetling while he looked down at me. "That is quite so, 6655321. Of course, it's only in the experimental stage at the moment. It's very simple, but very drastic." "But it's being used here, isn't it, sir?" I said. "Those new, white buildings by the south wall, sir. We've watched those being built, sir, when we've been doing our exercise." "It's not being used yet," he said. "Not in this prison, 6655321. Himself has grave doubts about it. I must confess I share those doubts. The question is whether such a technique can really make a man good. Goodness comes from within, 6655321. Goodness is something chosen. When a man cannot choose, he ceases to be a man." He would have gone on with a lot more of this Cal, but we could sloosh you the next lot of plennies marching clank, clank, clank down the iron stairs to come for their bit of religion. He said, "We'll have a little chat about this some other time. Now you'd better start the voluntary." So I went over to the Starry Stereo and put on J.S. Bach's Wachet auf choral prelude, and in these grahzny, vonny, bastard criminals and perverts came shambling like a lot of broke-down apes, the warders or chassos barking at them and lashing them. And soon the prison Charlie was asking them, "What's it going to be then, eh?" And that's where you came in. We had 4 of these lomticks of prison religion that morning, but the Charles said no more to me about this Ludovico's technique, whatever it was, my brothers. When I'd finished my rabbit with the stereo, he just gover-eated a few slovos of thanks, and then I was privateated back to the cell on Tier 6, which was my very vonny and crammed home. The chasso was not really too bad of a vec, and he did not toll-chock or kick me in when he'd opened up. He just said, "Here we are, sonny, back to the old water hole." And there I was with my new type droogs, all very criminal, but Bogby praised, not given to perversions of the body. There was Zophar on his bunk, a very thin and brown vec, who went on and on and on in his cancery golos, so that nobody bothered to sloosh you. What he was saying now, to nobody, was, "And at that time you couldn't get hold of a poggy," whatever that was, brothers. "Not if you used to hand over 10 million Archibald. So what do? Way I goes down to Turkey's and says, 'I've got this sprug on that motto saying, what can he do?'" It was all this very old-time, real criminal slang he spoke. Also there was Wall, who had only one glazzy, and he was tearing bits of his toenails off in honour of Sunday. Also there was Big Jew, a very fat, sweaty vec lying flat on his bunk dead. In addition there was Joe John and the doctor. Joe John was very mean and keen and wiry, and had specialised in, sexual assault. And the doctor had pretended to be able to cure Sif and Gon and Gleet, but he had only injected water. Also, he had killed off 2 Dvochkas instead, like he had promised, of getting rid of their unwanted loads for them. They were a terrible grahzny lot, really, and I didn't enjoy being with them, my brothers, any more than you do now, but it won't be for much longer. Now, what I want you to know is that this cell was intended for only 3 when it was built, but there were 6 of us there, all jammed together, sweaty and tight. And that was the state of all the cells in all the prisons in those days, brothers, and a dirty, cally disgrace it was, there not being decent room for a Chelovyak to stretch his limbs. And you will hardly believe what I say now, which is that on this Sunday they brossatted in another plenty. Yes, we had a horrible pisture of dumplings and Vonnie's stew, and were smoking a quiet cancer each in our bunks, when this Vec was thrown into our midst. It was a chinny, starry Vec, and it was him who started creeching complaints before we even had a chance to vary the position. He tried to, shake the bars, creeching, "I demand my sodding rights. This one's full up. It's a bleeding in position. That's what it is." But one of the chassos came back to say that he had to make the best of it and share a bunk with whoever would let him. Otherwise it would have to be the floor. "And," said the warder, "it's going to get worse, not better. A right dirty criminal world you lot are trying to build." Well, it was the letting in of this new Chelovyak that was really the start of my getting out of the old Stadja, for he was such a nasty, quarrelsome type of plenny with a very dirty mind and filthy intentions that trouble Natchinatted that very same day. He was also very boastful and started to make with a very sneery litzo at us all and a loud, proud golos. He made out that he was the only real Horosho Prestupnik in the whole zoo, going on that he'd done this and done the other and killed 10 Rosses with one crack of his rooker and all that cow. But nobody was very impressed, my brothers. So then he started on me being the youngest there, trying to say that as the youngest, I ought to be the one to zaz snoot on the floor and not him. But all the others were for me, creeching, "Leave him alone, you grahzny bratchny," and then he began the old whine about how nobody loved him. So that same notchy, I woke up to find this horrible plenny actually lying with me on my bunk, which was on the bottom of the 3-tier and also very narrow, and he was gover-eating dirty like love slovos and stroking away. So then I got real bazoomly and lashed out, though I could not video all that horror show, there being only this malenky little red light outside on the landing. But I knew it was this one, the Vonnie bastard, and then when the trouble really got underway and the lights were turned on, I could video his horrible litzo with all crovy dripping from his rot where I'd hit out with my clawing rooker. What slew chatted then, of course, was that my cellmates woke up and started to join in, tall-chocking a bit wild in the near dark, and the shoom seemed to wake up the whole tier, so that you could slooshy a lot of creeching and banging about with tin mugs on the wall, as though all the plennies in all the cells thought a big break was about to commence, my brothers. So then the lights came on, and the chassos came along in their shirts and trousers and caps, waving big sticks. We could video each other's flushed litzos and the shaking of fisty rookers, and there was a lot of creeching and cursing. Then I put in my complaint, and every chasso said it was probably your humble narrator, brothers, that started it all anyway. Me having no mark of a scratch on me, but this horrible plenny dripping red crovy from the rot where I'd got him with my clawing rooker. That made me real bazoomly. I said I would not sleep another notchy in that cell if the prison authorities were going to allow horrible, Vonnie, stinking, perverted Prestupniks to leap on my plot when I was in no position to defend myself, being asleep. "Wait till the morning," they said. "Is it a private room with bath and television that your honour requires? Well, all that will be seen to in the morning. But for the present, little Drew, get your bleeding Gulliver down on your straw-filled padushka, and let's have no more trouble from anyone. Right, right, right." And off they went with stern warnings for all. Then soon after the lights went out, and then I said I would sit up all the rest of the notchy, saying first to this horrible Prestupnik, "Go on, get on my bunk if you wish it. I fancy it no longer. You have made it filthy and cally with your horrible Vonnie plot lying on it already." But then the others joined in. Big Jew said, still sweating from the bit of a bit that we just had in the dark, "Not having that way, not, brothers. Don't give in to the squirt." So this new one said, "Crash your dermot, yid," meaning to shut up, but it was very insulting. So then Big Jew got ready to launch a Tolchok. The doctor said, "Come on, gentlemen, we don't want any trouble, do we?" in his very high-class golos. But this new Prestupnik was really asking for it. You could vidi that he thought he was a very big Bolshevik, and it was beneath his dignity to be sharing a cell with 6 and having to sleep on the floor, till I made this gesture at him. In his sneery way, he tried to take off the doctor, saying, "Oh, you want no more trouble, is that it, Archie Walls?" So Joe John, mean and keen and wiry, said, "If we can't have sleep, let's have some education. Our new friend here had better be taught a lesson." Although he specialised in sexual assault, he had a nice way of gover-eating, quiet and precise. So the new plennies sneered, "Kish and kosh and kush, you little terror." So then it all really started, but in a queer, gentle way, with nobody raising his golos much. The new plenny creeched a malenky bit at first, but the wall fisted his rot while Big Jew held him up against the bars so that he could be vidded in the malenky red light from the landing, and he just went, "Oh, oh, oh." It was not a very strong type of Vec, being very feeble in his trying to Tolchok back, and I suppose he made up for this by being shoomly in the golos and very boastful. Anyway, seeing the old crovy flow red in the red light, I felt the old joy like rising up in my kishkas, and I said, "Leave him to me. Go on, let me have him now, brothers." So Big Jew said, "Yes, yes, boy, that's fair. Flush him then, Alex." So they all stood around while I cracked at this prestupnik in the near dark. I fisted him all over, dancing about with my boots on, though unlaced, and then I tripped him, and he went crash, crash onto the floor. I gave him one real horror show kick on the Gulliver, and he went, "Oh!" Then he sort of snorted off to like sleep, and the doctor said, "Very well, I think that will be enough of a lesson," squinting to vidi this downed and beaten-up Beck on the floor. "Let him dream, perhaps, about being a better boy in the future." So we all climbed back into our bunks, being very tired now. What I dreamt of, oh my brothers, was of being in some very big orchestra, hundreds and hundreds strong, and the conductor was like a mixture of like Ludwig van and G.F. Handel, looking very deaf and blind and weary of the world. I was with the wind instruments, but what I was playing was like a white pinky bassoon made of flesh and growing out of my plot, right in the middle of my belly. And when I blew into it, I had to smack ha 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 very loud because it like tickled. And then Ludwig van G.F. got very razdraz and bazoomny. Then he came right up to my litso and screeched loud in my uko. Then I woke up like sweating. Of course, what the loud shoom really was the prison buzzer going brr, brr, brr. It was winter morning, and my glasses were all cali with sleep glue, and when I opened up, they were very sore in the electric light that had been switched on all over the zoo. Then I looked down and vidded this new prestupnik lying on the floor, very bloody and bruisy, and still out, out, out. Then I remembered about last night, and that made me smeck a bit. But when I got off the bunk and moved in with my bare noga, there was a feel of like stiff coldness, so I went over to the doctor's bunk and shook him always being very slow at waking up in the morning. But he was off his bunk scotty enough this time, and so were the others, except for Wall, who slept like dead meat. "Very unfortunate," the doctor said. "A heart attack. That's what it must have been." Then he said, looking round at us all, "You really shouldn't have gone for him like that. It was most ill-advised, really." Joe John said, Come, Doc, you weren't all that backward yourself in giving him a sly bit of fist." Then Big Jew turned on me, saying, "Alex, you were too impetuous. That last kick was a very, very nasty one." I began to get razzed about this and said, "Who started it, eh? I only got in at the end, didn't I?" I pointed at Joe John and said, "It was your idea." Wall snored a bit, loud, so I said, "Wake that vonny bratchny up. It was him that kept on at his rot while Big Jew here had him up against the bars." The doctor said, "Nobody will deny having a gentle little hit at the man to teach him a lesson, so to speak. But it's apparent that you, my dear boy, with the forcefulness and, shall I say, heedlessness of youth, dealt him the coup de grace. It's a great pity." "Traitors," I said. "Traitors and liars." Because I could vidi it was all like before, 2 years before, when my so-called droogs had left me to the brutal rookers of the Millicents. There was no trust anywhere in the world, oh my brothers, the way I could see it. And Joe John went and woke up Wall, and Wall was only too ready to swear that it was your humble narrator that had done the real dirty toll-chocking and brutality. When the Chassos came along, and then the Chief Chasso, and then the Governor himself, all these cell droogs of mine were very shoomly with tales of what I'd done to Ubivat, this worthless pervert, whose crobby-covered plot lay sack-like on the floor. That was a very queer day, oh my brothers. The dead plot was carried off, and then everybody in the whole prison had to stay locked up till further orders, and there was no pistia given out, not even a mug of hot chai. We just all sat there, and the warders or Chasso sort of strode up and down the tier, now and then creeching, "Shut it," or "Close that hole," whenever they sluiced even a whisper from any of the cells. And about 11 o'clock in the morning, there was a sort of like stiffening and like excitement and like the von of fear spreading from outside the cell. And then we could vidi the Governor and the Chief Chasso and some very bolshy important-looking objects walking by right real scorry, gover-eating like bazoomny. They seemed to walk right to the end of the tier, then they could be sluiced walking back again, more slow this time, and you could sluice the Governor, a very sweaty, fatty, fair-haired Vex, saying slobos like, "But, sir," and, "Well, what can be done, sir?" and so on. Then the whole lot stopped at our cell, and the Chief Chasso opened up. You could vidi who was the real important Vec right away, very tall and with blue glasses and with real horror show platies on him, the most lovely suit, brothers, I had ever vidded, absolutely in the height of fashion. He just sort of looked right through us poor plennies, saying, in a very beautiful, real educated Goss, "The government cannot be concerned any longer with outmoded penological theories. Cram criminals together and see what happens. You get concentrated criminality, crime in the midst of punishment. And soon we may be needing all our prison space for political offenders." I didn't pony this at all, brothers, but after all, he was not gover-eating to me. Then he said, "Common criminals like this unsavory crowd," that meant me, brothers, as well as the others who were real prestupniks and treacherous with it, "can best be dealt with on a purely curative basis. Kill the criminal reflex, that's all. Full implementation in a year's time. Punishment means nothing to them. You can see that. They enjoy their so-called punishment. They start murdering each other. And he turned his stern blue glasses onto me, so I said, bold, "With respect, sir, I object very strongly to what you said then. I am not a common criminal, sir, and I am not unsavoury. The others may be unsavoury, but I am not." The Chief Chasso went all purple and creaked, "You shut your bleeding hole, you! Don't you know who this is?" All right, said this big Vec. Then he turned to the governor and said, "You can use him as a trailblazer. He's young, bold, vicious. Brodsky will deal with him tomorrow, and you can sit in and watch Brodsky. It works all right, don't worry about that. This vicious young hoodlum will be transformed out of all recognition." And those hard Slovos brothers were like the beginning of my freedom.